Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursaleen Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Amma ba'd. Praise belongs to Allah, Lord of the worlds, and blessings and salutations on the noblest prophets and messengers, our leader Sayyidina Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and on his family and on his companions. Jazakumullah khair for coming to tonight's Halaqa. We're gonna we're starting a new exciting thing, which is we're starting a new section that we're going to be covering. It's called Adabul Muasharat for today's Halaqa, the etiquettes of social life in Islam. And then also, mashallah, based on wonderful feedback and constructive critiques from several attendees, people have asked for these Halaqas to be recorded and to be live streamed. And so tonight, and I'm not as tech savvy as I would like to be, so my apologies in advance for any sort of technical glitches. But mashallah, our own Usman Qadri, who's in class right now, but helped talk me through some of this. So I'm going to be, going through a slideshow and then reading from a text. And then inshallah, for the next several weeks, we're going to go through another text, and it'll be all online. And I can email the link, because I don't want to share this with the broader, kind of world at this point. But for students of the Halaqa and people that are genuinely interested in accessing it, we'll have a link to access the slides. And also the recordings from previous weeks for people that are interested, inshallah. So we're going to get right into it. This is a section that I want to talk about that's really, really important, called Adabul Muasharat. It comes from the word Adab and Muasharat, which means social life. So we're going to begin here with the idea that scholars have, when they talk about the framework of Sharia, they talk about that there's 5 components to the Sharia. The first of which is aqa'id, the second of which is amal, the third of which is mu'amalat, the fourth of which is akhlaq, and the fifth of which is mu'ashara. And I'm going to break down each one of these, and then I'm going to, inshallah, see how it kind of ties together with our topic today. So these are the 5 requisite components of the framework of what we talk about Sharia, when we use the concept of Sharia. So the first is aqaid. Aqaid comes from aqidah. It's plural of aqidah, means beliefs. And this is very self-explanatory. I'm going to build our way up to the one that I want to focus on for the next few classes. The first is aqaid. We believe in the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the prophethood of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, all of the related beliefs that make up sort of the, when we talk about iman, what do we believe in? The second is amal, is a plural for amal, or righteous actions. These are your ibadat, your ritual actions and modes of worship. Praying, fasting, giving zakat, going for hajj, reading Quran, doing dhikr, and anything related to a pious, righteous action that gets you closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The third are mu'amalat, transactions. And this is when we talk about business, finance, trade, commerce, your economic affairs, if one might say, in day-to-day living, right? In buying and selling, and how you manage your money, etc. That is a requisite component of Sharia. The fourth is akhlaq, moral character. This is humility, generosity, and then the opposites, which are arrogance and jealousy, envy, etc., etc. That all relates to the matters of the heart of akhlaq, and we're going to talk about that. The last one is mu'ashara. Mu'ashara is in Islam is talked about as social conduct. So I have quick examples here, and I'm going to unpack a lot of these. That's the point of today's halaqa. Mindful and beneficial behavior, your conduct, your comportment. Healthy and positive relationships are part of mu'ashara. Never inconveniencing others. The idea of being aware of interactions, verbal and non-verbal interactions with people around you, and that in your space and in your life, that all comes under mu'ashara. Now, the main word I want to focus out for much of today is the idea of adab. So Islam has rules of etiquettes and an ethical code affecting every aspect of life, and that's really the beauty of our deen, that we have this blueprint and this roadmap of really how to live a successful, felicitous life that's pleasing to Allah, based on this idea of adab infusing everything about your life, from the way that you eat, the way you dress, the way that you smile, the way that you engage with people, the way that you literally engage with your physical environment or in the space around you. All of that and beyond is part of adab, right? So it's an ethical code affecting every aspect of life. Now, adab in the Arabic language, and when you talk about in the context of behavior, refers to prescribed Islamic etiquette and conduct. And so here are some words, because it's concepts in Arabic are very broad, and so you talk about related ideas that derive from that: refinement, good manners, courtesy, decorum, decency, respect, comportment, appropriateness, mindfulness. All of these come under the rubric of the idea of the concept of adab. Now, good adab is practicing or manifesting correct conduct and codes of behavior. Doing the right thing at the right time in the best possible way, I think, is a beautiful, pithy, definition of adab. Doing the right thing at the right time in the best way possible. And I want you to use your imagination. Like, there's an adab for how you talk to someone that's a peer. There's an adab for how you talk to someone that's, this is a problem of language, but sort of that outranks you, right? A teacher, an elder, someone that in a work capacity, a supervisor. Then there's an adab for how you talk to someone that is a subordinate to you, someone that's younger than you in age, someone that's not as a student, the way they talk to a teacher and the way that a teacher talks to a student, the way that a parent talks to a child and vice versa, versus, the way people talk to their peers, etc. So it's doing the right thing in that interaction with what you say and how you say it, your body language as well as what you're verbally expressing at the right time and in the best way possible. That's really a beautiful idea of understanding what adab is. And I'm just using one example, which is literally this, one interaction. There's, millions of avenues of our life that come under this. So adab includes all that is good, every noble characteristic, habit, or trait that a believer, a mu'min or a mu'minah, should apply to their life. Now, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ had the most refined and most beautiful manners, and he taught us through his ﷺ noble example the appropriate, that's really a key word, the appropriate adab for everything, for eating, socializing, worshipping, working, personal care, personal hygiene. All of these have associated adab. Adab is a plural of adab to them. Now, if you go on to the idea of the prophetic mission, the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's mission had two purposes. The first was teaching belief. We talked about aqidah and worship and ibadah, right? Aqidah and ibadah here, that's the first purpose of the Prophet ﷺ's mission, which is to come to people, bring them the powerful concept of tawheed, of what we believe, and then how to worship Allah. What is the way that Allah wants to be worshipped and deserves to be worshipped? Through our prayer, through our fasting, through our zakat, through our hajj, through our dhikr, through our reading Quran, and all of these things. And the second is, the Prophet ﷺ, it was just as critical a component to his mission, which is the idea of akhlaq. And for us, what ties these two together are both of these are from wahi. Both of these were from divine revelation. Because many of us unfortunately only focus on the first part. And I'm saying unfortunately in that, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. Of course we need to understand, the essential fundamental aspect of what we believe and how we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But it can't be at the expense or and the detriment of neglecting the idea of the realm of akhlaq, of moral conduct and character, and of adab, of social conduct. Because both of these are inspired and sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're divinely ordained and divinely inspired to the Prophet ﷺ. And there's numerous ayat, I didn't list them here right now, that talk about, Allah ta'ala says in the Quran, where He exalts the status of the Rasul ﷺ, deservedly so, as we would say, is that Allah ta'ala says that we have created you upon an exalted character. And Allah Ta'ala says elsewhere in the Quran about the Prophet ﷺ that he's uswatan hasana, that he is a beautiful example for those who look to him and for the believers that take heed from this, right? Now, there's a very well-known hadith, it's a beautiful hadith. The Prophet ﷺ said, on Yawm al-Qiyamah, on the day of resurrection, nothing will weigh heavier upon the scales than good character, than the idea of good akhlaq, good character, and good adab, and good conduct. The next hadith is, the best of you is the best among you in conduct, in your akhlaq, and related in your adab. Imam Bayhaqi relates this hadith that Prophet ﷺ said, I have only been sent to perfect noble character. And this directly ties into the ayah that I just quoted, where Allah Ta'ala is praising the Prophet ﷺ and saying, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that He created the Prophet ﷺ upon an exalted station, an exalted maqam, exalted standard of character. And then Yahya ibn Mu'adh, who was amongst the early Salaf, he was a great Central Asian scholar and worshipper of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He lived in the area of what is modern day Central Asia, around Afghanistan and Anatolia, and he said, good character is such a virtue that it engulfs other vices, while evil character is such a vice that it destroys other virtues, which is a very, very beautiful and thought-provoking statement. Good character is such a virtue that it engulfs or swallows other vices. So if you have other bad habits and other bad deeds, but you have good character, the good character will essentially nullify those vices that you have. Whereas the opposite, vile character, evil character, having bad akhlaq and having bad adab is such a vice that it will destroy your virtues. And which takes us to the next point here, the next slide, is adab is intimately connected to knowledge and action. And so there's a lot of slides here that I want to unpack here, notes that I want to share. Adab isn't really taught, but it has to develop naturally. Children acquire adab from their parents. Good parents, part of their tarbiyah, part of their moral character building of their children is to model and to teach them good adab. Students from their teachers, youth from their elders. We may have much knowledge but lack adab, and we may have much adab but lack knowledge. But adab is more important and valuable than knowledge. And this really is, I think, should be sort of a cognitive shift for many people, because we live in an age now where, and you've heard me talk about this before, I mean, mashallah, like literally in my hand, at your literal fingertips, you have like what was once upon a time considered supercomputing power, right? I can access unfathomable amounts of data, right, at breakneck speeds, right? Literally, I can access millions of bits of data like within seconds that I want. Books, entire libraries are accessible at my fingertips, Islamic and or otherwise, right? And we live in an age where we worship data and information. That's why they call it the information age. And so, what did Imam Abdullah ibn Mubarak rahmatullah say? Over 1,200 years ago, Imam Abdullah ibn Mubarak said to his time, his teacher said to him, Imam Abdullah ibn Mubarak would go on to become the greatest muhaddith of his time, who was one of the teachers of who? Of Imam al-Bukhari. Imam Ibn Mubarak says to his students that my teacher told me we are more in need of acquiring adab than in learning hadith. Now I want that to sink in for a moment. This is the teacher who is ultimately going to become history's greatest master of hadith. And he's saying that we are people that live in a time we're more in need of acquiring adab than we are in acquiring hadith, in learning hadith. And now you have people that will literally pull up hadith on their phones and want to argue and debate with you, right? And completely devoid of adab. Imam Zakaria al-Ambari said, knowledge without adab is like fire without wood. And adab without knowledge is like a spirit without a body. I'm going to read that again. Knowledge without adab is like fire without wood, right? That eventually it's going to extinguish itself. There's no fuel to it, right? And adab without knowledge is like a spirit without a body. Is that it's ethereal, it's just floating around, right? You can have adab, but you don't have knowledge, you don't understand how to relate to these things. Now, Imam al-Qarafi, who was an amazing, brilliant scholar of Islam, particularly in fiqh and jurisprudence, he said, you should know that a little of good manners, of good adab, is better than a lot of good actions. A little bit of adab is better for you than a lot of good actions. And by good actions, he means here what we consider momentous actions. Qiyamul Layl, and singing qasaid and reading Quran and fasting and doing nawafil and all of that, and nasheeds and all of that. And he says you should know that a little bit of good manners is better for you than having what you consider to be a mountain of good actions. And Imam Ibn Qayyim al-Jawzi rahmatullahi, who was one of the greatest scholars of his generation and subsequent generations, said, indeed, the deen itself is adab. And I love the way he lays it out. Basically, anyone surpassing you in adab is better than you in deen. Anyone that has better adab than you, that has better conduct, that has better decorum, that has better courtesy, that has better manners, that has better mindfulness, that has better courtesy than you, that has better respect and appropriate social conduct and noble conduct is better than you in deen. Just so it puts it in perspective. Sadly, today, parents, teachers, and elders are no longer treated with the proper adab. Even as basic manners are disappeared, right? So what one scholar called, we live in an adabless society. And I don't want to belabor the point here. And you've seen this, you've heard me talk about it in Halaqa before. We live in a society where, even the concept of decorum, of how to politely disagree with people, right? We live in an age of enragement, of absolute tear down the walls. Beat the doors down to get your point across. Whether it's online misbehavior and shouting and screaming because you think that you stand for a righteous cause and you think that you're going to get your point across with like a bludgeon over someone's head and make them get as woke as you or make them see your point of view and how you want to see in the world. I mean, that's one sliver of what we're talking about. What is some of it is the misbehavior and the nonsense and foolishness that people have in online interactions, and the other is that people, the way they misbehave face to face. Right? I'm not even talking peer to peer. I'm talking to people that you like. There's an adab that you have with your friends, with people that you don't have takalluf. There's no formality with them. Even there with your friends, you have to have adab. And I'm going to read you some quotes in just a second. So from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. But then there's like how you talk to an elder, a teacher, a superior, an administrator, a faculty member, a teacher, or someone like that. Right? And this is completely, we live in an adabless society where you even bring up the concept of having adab and people scoff at you. They literally laugh you out, of the room. Of like how antiquated and quaint are you that you talk about adab, right? Rather, what? We compete instead of competing for adab in the sense of like refining your adab so that you can please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in your relationships with your teachers, with your mentors, with your faculty, with your elders, with your parents, with your ammus and khalas, with your uncles and aunts and people in society. We compete for worldly gain and personal fame. It's about how many likes do I get? How many people do I have following me? How woke am I as an activist? How loud of a bullhorn and bully pulpit do I command in that bizarre world of social media? Or, how many people sort of love and adore me and validate, legitimize what I think I'm doing in the world. And ultimately, this is a materialistic way of being in the world, of expecting that validation and acclaim and accolades, whether they're academic or whether they're for your activism or for whatever it is. That at the end of the day is what most people, if you cut through, the chaff, that's what most people are really hankering after. Now, I just want to go back and visit one thing for some of the students that just arrived that missed this, because I think it's really important, because this is the foundation we're going to frame. This is going to frame where we go on next, and then I'm going to shift gears and read from a text. So just to recap for some of the newcomers, when we talk about adab, Islam has rules of etiquette and an ethical code affecting every single aspect of life. And hopefully in the next few weeks, we look at no better example than Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And you look at the adab of how he had in every aspect of his life. And that's inshallah going to unfold and be shared with you, over the upcoming weeks, inshallah. Adab in the context of behavior refers to prescribed Islamic etiquette and conduct. So these are adjectives I think I really describe, that I think unpack this. The idea of refinement, of good manners, of courtesy, of decorum, of decency, of respect, of comportment, of appropriateness, and of mindfulness. Good adab is practicing and manifesting correct conduct and the code and the correct codes of behavior, the appropriate codes of behavior, and it's doing the right thing at the right time in the best way possible. That's adab. Adab includes all that is good, every noble characteristic, habit, or trait that a believer should apply to their life. The Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had the most refined and beautiful manners, and he taught us through his sallallahu alaihi wasallam noble example, the appropriate adab. And that's really the key word, the appropriate adab, doing the right thing at the right time in the best way possible. Because different situations call for different adab. And it takes a person of deep learning and refinement and introspection that has adab, that's worked on it, to know what different situations call for, right? For the way you eat, the way you socialize, the way you worship, the way you work, the way you carry on your dunyawi affairs, the way you carry on your personal affairs, the way you carry on your spiritual affairs, the way you take care of your body, even to that extent. So we're going to move on now. Now there's 3 approaches to learning exceptional adab. One, and this is from a beautiful teacher who I had the benefit of studying some hadith with, Dr. Mufti Abdurrahman ibn Yusuf, who is a scholar and a teacher in London, England. And he said, this is his advice. He says, first is read books on adab, right? Essentially, adab is putting into practice what you know. And so, this is what the Quran has warned about, and so many times, and hadith have warned about, is that essentially don't be, the donkey that's laden with books. In that you may know a subject, but it has no actual application or effect, meaningful effect in your life. And I'm not even talking about in dunyawi affairs now, I'm talking about in Islam. You have people that have gone through Islamic schools, and I'm just making statements from my travels and the mentoring and the coaching and the counseling that I do. People that have grown up in Islamic Muslim societies, that have gone to Islamic schools from K through 12, that have gone to Islamic, institutions and whatnot, and they have this data, they have information, but it's not knowledge. It's not translated into action in that it doesn't impact and transform their life. What good is it for spending 10 years in an Islamic school or 15 years in some institution where, at the end of the day, and I don't mean to compare it in that sense, but just to be very direct about this, like I could just read the same things that you can regurgitate, right? That someone can regurgitate that isn't applying to their life. I can read it off a PDF or I can read it on a website. You have to put into practice what you've learned. That is adab. Now the other point on this is adab traditionally wasn't. There are books on adab, but I'm going to read you one in a second. Right? There were little manuals that put together. But the way that adab was put into place, you had to be with people. So we're going to get to that in just a second. So these are 3 exceptional resources I want to tell you. There's a book called Islamic Manners. It's a beautiful book. I have the link to the PDF there, and it's in when I share this with people. Please link on to the PDF. It's a translation. It's a very well done translation by this amazing scholar, Syrian scholar, Sheikh Abdul Fattah Abu Ghuda rahimahullah, who passed away recently, and he was one of the greatest living scholars from Bilad al-Sham, from the greater Syrian area, and wrote this very short but really, really beautiful book. And maybe some, later on we can pull some extracts from it. It's not a very long book. The PDF is accessible right there. That's an example of a text that's written, that's going to apply to your day-to-day life. Second is there's a great book called Adab al-Suhba by Imam Sharani. And there's actually, I have the book, I have an English translation of it. But actually, there's a Mufti Abdurrahman ibn Maghera on his website, from the institution he leads in the UK, they taught a class based on the book, and all of the videos are online, and you can actually watch them teaching the class. It's an amazing book. It's linked right there. And the last is the book that I'm going to read for you in a second, Adabul Muasharat, who was written by the late Sheikh Ashraf Ali Thanwi rahmatullahi, who much can be said about. Some of my teachers are from his intellectual and spiritual lineage. Sheikh Ashraf Ali Thanwi rahmatullahi was born in the late 1800s in what was pre-partition Hindustan, the Indian subcontinent, and he died in 1943 before the British partition, and so he saw the last vestiges of British colonialism and the havoc that wreaked. He saw many of his own contemporaries tortured and maimed and killed by the British and part of their colonial despotic project. But the point that I bring up is that he was such a renowned scholar amongst his contemporaries in the late 1800s and early 20th century that he was given the honorific title Hakim al-Ummah. Hakim al-Ummah means the wise man of the Ummah. He wrote over 900 books in his life. Some of them very short like this, and some of them multi-volume encyclopedic works on tafsir and hadith and fiqh and things like that. He wrote a book, and I have the translation of it right here, done in South Africa, called Adabul Muasharat, and I'm going to try to find a link, a PDF for you as well. So that's the first thing he says. Read books on adab. You have to commit to this, in that read this and absorb and imbibe this information, and then the information will translate and transform into knowledge, how you put it into practice. The second is, there are no better living examples in the sense that we can access than the stories of the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum ajma'in, than the companions, may Allah be pleased with all of them. Read their lives, the men and women of the greatest generation, and look at how they were taught by the best teacher, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and who were the best class of students, radiyallahu anhum ajma'in, and how they translated that into their lives. And these are like gold mines of information, right, to transform your life. And the third thing is sit in the company of those who possess good adab. People can unconsciously benefit from good company. This helps you learn new things. Always observe other people and implement anything beneficial. And I'm going to stress this point right now, and I'm going to come back to it again and again, and then we're going to move on to the next slide, inshallah, and then we can probably wrap up with this text for today. This, going back to what you've heard me talk about for the previous sessions, whether you call it a coach, whether you call it a mentor, whether you call it an advisor, whatever you want to call it, you call it an ustad, you call it an imam, ustada, whatever it is, male or female, I encourage and invite you to seek out someone in your life that you develop an actual meaningful personal relationship with. Someone that you sit in their suhbah, in their physical company, face to face, and you observe their behavior, you look at the way they talk, you ask questions, you look at the way they answer your questions, you look at every aspect of their life, and then how they manifest and exhibit good adab and good comportment, good decorum, good mindful behavior, and you take that in, you absorb it. And in the best way, you're not writing it down. By being in the presence and company of people like that, of men and women like that, it will, inshallah, by osmosis, right? Perhaps is the right word for it, it will have an effect on your life. It behooves us to have those people in our life. People that even if you're not physically in their presence, someone that you can pick up a phone, you can text them and say, I need to talk to you, or I need to ask you about this or about that. Once you've established a base relationship, that they care about you, they ask about how you're doing, how your life is going, they've actually invested into your well-being, and they care about you, and you return, you reciprocate that genuine interest by you're investing your time into being in their company and learning from them. That is the way of this deen. Do you think, if you want an example relating number 3 to 2, how many of the Sahaba were literate? I don't have the data, like the percentage on me right now, but I think I can safely say a minority of the Sahaba, of the Ansar and the Muhajirin, were literate in the fact that they were reading and writing, right, at that time. But these are the people that had completely transformed their lives through the suhbah, the companionship of the Prophet ﷺ. It was about being in the company of the Prophet ﷺ, about going to the masjid with him, seeing him in the marketplace, inviting him to their house to eat, going with him when he was going to visit people, the sick and the poor and the needy, and going to do, every aspect of the life of the Prophet ﷺ, the companions were with him. Some more than others, right? And you can see how that changed their lives. I'll give you another example. Right? So this is what I mean is that they were consciously or subconscious or unconsciously transformed by being in the suhbah of the Prophet ﷺ. And they were looking at things and then they were changing their lives, right? According to that. It's very famous narration said about Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, rahimullah, who's one of the greatest scholars that this ummah ever produced. We don't have time to go into his biography right now. Imam Ahmad would give his dars, his lesson or his halaqa, if we would say that, in the masjid. People say that there were thousands of people there. Thousands of people would come to listen to his halaqas in the masjid. Only a few hundred of them were actually his students. His students, meaning they were tulab, they were students of knowledge, right? They weren't studying, they weren't working in the marketplace, they weren't craftsmen, they weren't farmers, they didn't have other, affairs keeping them occupied in the dunya. They had dedicated their lives, right, to learning the knowledge of this deen. Only a few hundred out of a few thousand in his halaqas were his students who would actually sit in the front, and they would have notes and they would write with pen and paper and take notes, and they would come consistently every day. And these are the people that got ijazah, that then became great students and scholars in their own right? But the point I'm making is this: only a fraction of the thousands that were there were actually, diligent students. The rest of them were what we would say awam, common people. They had jobs, they had lives, they were young, they were old, they had families, they had responsibilities, right? In every aspect of their life. But they would come to the masjid. Why? For the blessings and the barakah of being in the company of a scholar of this deen. First of all. Second of all, they came to just listen to the beneficial counsels and advices of Imam Ahmad and observe his adab. To look at the way that a man of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and by extension a woman of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a person, a wali of Allah, a friend of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the way that they lived their life, and they only saw a slice of it, right? They were only seeing him in the masjid for that amount of time, but even that is what brought people again and again and again. That's the kind of relationship that they had. They had people that they valued in their life, right? I bet you, if I may say, Imam Ahmad probably didn't have much of a relationship with those thousands of people as much as he did with the students, but there was that relationship of muhabba, right, of brotherhood and sisterhood that connected them. And so what I'm saying here is this is the piece of advice from Dr. Mufti Abdurrahman ibn Yusuf, to learn exceptional adab means to sit with people. And this goes back to a point that I said before. You can read books of adab, but this is just words on a page. You have to be with people that actually have adab that you want to emulate, and they exude it, right? That they live out this good adab, and then from that companionship, you're going to benefit. right? And that's a lot of what Imam Sharani talks about in Adab al-Suhbah. When you're in good company, what is the adab of being in company? How do you physically, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically draw from that and benefit from that kind of experience, right? So what we're going to do now is I just want to read from this book, Adabul Muasharat, which Sheikh Thanwi Rahmatullahi wrote. This is a translation of the book. It's actually amazing in that it has chapters on every conceivable thing that you can talk about. I'm not going to run through them all right now, but what we're going to do is when we go next week and we talk about prophetic code, actually maybe we can get to it today, is that you're going to see from the life of the Prophet ﷺ, some of these threads are going to be drawn out, and maybe after we conclude that, we'll come back to this text. So I just want to share some hadith that he has. This is from his introduction, right? And so there are ayahs that talk about exhorting the Sahaba to have good adab. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, O people of Iman, when it is said to you to give space in a gathering, then make space. When it is said to you stand up, then stand up. Now, there's a lot of tafsir that can be given on this ayah. For our purposes, the way that Shaykh Thanwi Rahmatullahi uses it is to say this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Rabbul Izzat, Rabbul Alameen subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, he's giving advice, not even advice, he's giving instructions to the companions, to the believers, that when it's said to you to make space in a gathering, then make space, right? This is a form of instruction, it's didactic, to teach them the adab of when they're in the Halaqa of the Prophet ﷺ. Allah Ta'ala says elsewhere, O people of Iman, do not enter homes besides your own homes as long as you have not sought permission and greeted the inmates of the houses. That is best for you to ponder. Then if you do not find anyone therein, do not enter therein unless permission is granted to you. And if it is said to you, return, then turn back. This is purer for you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows well what you are doing. This is also, and there's a context to this, right? We're not going to the tafsir of this right now, but Allah Ta'ala is instructing the Sahaba that when you go to someone's house, the adab is that you give salam. Don't enter if it's your house, you can enter, but if it's someone else's house, you seek permission. Right, and there's a long story behind this, the context of this ayah. But you give salam to the people in the houses, and that's best for you. And then if you don't find anyone therein, then you have to leave. You don't have permission. You don't have that ijaza, that permission to enter. And if it's said to you, return. If the inmate of the house says, I can't talk to you right now, they don't have to explain themselves to why they can't meet with you. The adab is there, no questions asked. You politely return. And then we're going to unpack this a little bit. But I want to share some a hadith with you that he goes on for several pages that inshallah will take us a few minutes, but are really, really relevant to this. And these are different, I want you to imagine, these are literally different vignettes, almost like slices, right, from the life of the Prophet ﷺ. And there's quite a variety here. Rasulullah ﷺ ordered that while eating in company, one should not take 2 dates at a time without having obtained the consent of one's companions, of one's friend. Such an insignificant act has been prohibited solely on account of disrespect and because of the dislike which this act will engender in others. The point here is this. We talked about adab is really being mindful. Mindfulness in the sense of if I'm sitting around and there's a few items to eat, right? Use the example of dates, right? And there's 3 and there's 4 of us, right? And I don't, as much as I desire those, right? For me to take more than what's allotted to me, it's in front of me, I should have what in our minds, astaghfirullah, may be seemingly insignificant, a completely mundane, pointless act to ask someone can I have not just this apple, but can I have 2 apples? Would you mind? The Prophet ﷺ says this is from adab, of the moment you're in, of the people you're eating with. Rasulullah ﷺ said, the one who eats raw garlic and onions should remain aloof from the people until they've cleansed themselves, since the odor will be annoying to others. Rasulullah ﷺ actually forbade this, what you really and I think is insignificant act. Now I want you to imagine that. This is from the hadith, we have it from the seerah. Raw garlic and onions actually have a very strong odor to them, right? And to eat it and then to be in the company of people that it gives you bad breath, or that it affects, your clothes or whatnot, and that the inconvenience that causes to people. Now you can use any number of things, right? You can extrapolate from this, is that if you're smoking, and I'm not going to get into whether one should or should not be smoking, but let's just say if one is around people that are smoking, right, to then go to the masjid, to go into a place, to go and to be around people, one should brush your teeth, change your clothes, because you had that secondhand smoke residue on you. You can extrapolate so many things from these gems of the Prophet ﷺ. Rasulullah ﷺ said it's not lawful for a guest to stay for such a length of time which imposes a difficulty upon the host. in this prohibition, an act which causes an inconvenience to others has been proscribed. Rasulullah, and if you have any questions about this, like, I can unpack more of these. I'm just literally going down through bullet points right now. Inshallah, I think that once I finish this, then we'll do Q&A, and then we'll start prophetic code next week, inshallah. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that when one is eating in the company, one should continue eating until the others have completed, even though one may have eaten to satiation. By discontinuing to eat, those who are still eating are put to shame. It is thus clear that one should not act in any way which embarrasses others around them. Such people, on account of natural shame, will refrain from taking something in a gathering, although they wish for it. And then he goes on with some more things. Now remember, this is a kind of a stilted translation because it's done. It's South African translation of an originally Urdu text, so there's already several layers there. But just bear with me. In a hadith, it is narrated that once Jabir radiallahu anhu came to the house of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he knocked on the door, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam inquired from behind the door, "Who is it?" And Jabir said, radiallahu anhu said, "It's me, Ana, it's me." And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was annoyed by this and said back to him, "It is me, it is me." And from this we learn that statements should not be made ambiguously. One should speak with clarity to enable the listener to fully understand. Ambiguous statements that cause confusion perturb people. This is amazing. I've actually heard Sheikh Hamza talk about this in a separate lecture, right? He talks about, like, in that moment. And Jabir was a young companion, right? He went and he said, "It's me." Like, how would the Prophet ﷺ have known behind the door, right? And the Prophet ﷺ in that moment is expressing his displeasure and disappointment with the behavior of this companion. Because remember, he's acting as an ustad, as a teacher, as a nabi to his student. And so in that moment, he's grabbing his attention and saying, "Don't say it's me, it's me." That's meaningless, so to say, in that encounter. Like, who do I know who's there? And then that Sahabi, you can bet, good students are very attuned to the tone of voice and to what their teachers are saying, right? So he learned right away that that's not how you act, not just with the Prophet ﷺ, obviously, but with other people as well. There's a lesson there. Sayyidina Anas said that no person was dearer to the Sahaba than Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In spite of this, he says the Sahaba would not stand in respect for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam because of his aversion to this mode of showing respect. Right? This establishes that any etiquette, way of respect, or any form of service that is displeasing to the person should not be rendered to them. One should give priority to the wishes and feelings of others, not to one's own desires. Some people, by their insistence to render certain acts of service to righteous people, are in actual fact inconveniencing them. Rasulullah ﷺ said that it's not permissible for a person to intrude in the company of two people without obtaining their consent. Such an intrusion constricts the hearts. Thus, it's necessary to abstain from acts and attitudes which inhibit or causes inconvenience to others. Many people know this hadith, right? It's a beautiful hadith. It's a well-known hadith. I hope people's parents taught this to them, which is that if two people are sitting and having a conversation and a third person comes into that conversation, they should actually say salam and say, do you mind if I join you? Like, if there's two people on the side talking, you don't just kind of float on over and just make yourself kind of just stand there, because they could be having a private conversation that has nothing to do with you, and they don't want you there, nor are you expected or have the permission to be there, right? And whether this is people sitting in a coffee shop, people on a bench outside, people standing outside, people sitting down in the dining hall, this applies to so many avenues of life. Now think of there's another point to this, that when there's three people, two of them should not be having a conversation that leaves the third one left out. Allahu Akbar. I mean, look at the magnanimous character of the Prophet ﷺ. I mean, even to what today, I mean, I hate to say it, but today, most people, if you told them to that, they would be like, "What are you talking about? What a pointless, meaningless thing to even point out." And look at the words that he uses, right? Sheikh Tanwi Rahmatullah says, beware of these kinds of actions. Because what do? They constrict the heart. They don't expand the heart. And what was the nabuwah of the Prophet ﷺ? Was expanding the hearts and bringing the hearts together. Not to constrict the hearts and to break the bonds between people. So if there's three people and two of them are talking in innuendo or some sort of coded language, right, to the exclusion of the third person, that's so despicable. to like leave out that person who's literally right there in your presence. Why? Not at like you and I think of like kaba'ir, of major sins of haram and backbiting and slander and fornication and murder and theft and whatnot. It's because you're scratching the heart of that person in that moment. The mu'min or mu'minah, the believer, is always like finely attuned. The one with good adab is always paying attention to what their verbal and non-verbals are, what's projecting to the world around them. Now, according to the hadith, Rasulullah ﷺ would cover his mouth with his hand or a handkerchief when he would sneeze. In this way, he stifled the sound to avoid causing any annoyance or inconvenience to others around him. This establishes that one should not annoy or startle or inconvenience one's companions by means of obnoxious or loud noises or shouting. Sayyidina Jabir radiallahu anhu says that the Sahaba would sit down in any place when they reached the gathering of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They would not pass through others in order to obtain seating ahead. This attitude of the Sahaba establishes that the adab, or the etiquettes of a majlis or a gathering, the slightest inconvenience to others was avoided. Now, on this note, I'm going to make a couple of quick points, and then inshallah we're going to continue because it's actually relevant. I'm going to try to give you one is talking about these beautiful lessons from the seerah and the hadith, but I want to also give you that practical dimension to what you can apply right away. And this is any sort of gathering, right? I want you to imagine if you go to someone's house and you're hanging out for chai or just whatever at your friends, don't sit by the door. Don't take up a spot on the floor, on the couch, by the door. This is really refined adab, and I can only tell you what I've learned if the modicum of knowledge I have about this from having read these hadith and having them narrated to me by my teachers, and then seeing my teachers, men and women, put this into action. Because if you're blocking the door, but when people walk in, automatically people walk in, they're just like, where do I go? So what you do is you leave the room from the door and you go to the other side. Now, how does it apply? Come to Jummah. What is it? The most ajr and thawab, if that's why you're coming to Jummah, if you're getting there for rewards, the most reward is in the front rows. What is this thing that people have with leaning against the wall, with the pillar, on the side, sitting in the back? Because then there's people that are going to have to inevitably, there's no space, you've left a whole blank row or half a blank row in front of you. People that are going to come from behind, they're going to have to walk around you or in front of you. Whereas if you get there early, you should go for your sake to get your sawab, and then it's double point score, because then by you sitting in the front row, you're leaving room in the back for the person that comes behind you for not having to walk in front of you, right? And it's these kinds of things that sadly are lost. And I'm using literally 2 examples, but you can extrapolate this in any number of ways. Right? I'm going to give you another example. I don't know how many of you drive, but if you drive just to a place, right? You go to someone's house. This is really, I wanted to say, this is like life. This is I pray to God that you're doing qiyam and reciting nasheeds and Quran and fasting Mondays and Thursdays and doing all those things. That's awesome for you. What did our mashayikh say? That a little bit of adab is better than a lot of action without adab. Right? You go to someone's house and then you park your car in the middle of the driveway. So people there's a gap in front. People can't get in because there's a spot in the back. Or you put your shoes in such a way when you come to someone's house by the door that the next person has to trample over your shoes or walk around your shoes versus taking the extra millisecond and then putting your shoes on the side so that you know that there's 5 other people coming to this party or coming to this place after me that now I've left the space for them. Right? Or hanging your jacket in such a way that it's going to take up all the room on the space versus putting it on the side of the coat rack or the shelf, right? You can use your imagination. There's millions of ways that this plays out. That's your Islam, day in and day out. This is your Islam beyond the 5 minutes, 5 times a day that you're in the musalla or in your office or in your classroom, which I hope and pray to Allah is an amazing salah. This is beyond your all of the ritual you're doing, right? Which you talked about the 5 components of Sharia. That's so important, but that's number 2, right? In the scheme, that's under your ibadat, your worship. This is under your 4 and 5, right? This is under your akhlaq and your adab, your conduct and your character. How you live your life. I'm not even saying apply it to Muslims. This is who you are with the people around you, the people on your suite mates, the people on your floor, right? Your neighbors, the people you like sit next to on the bus, the people that are sitting next to you in class, like in the lecture hall, of like instead of like propping down your bag. I can't tell you how many times this happened. Like you go to a place and there's like, there's not many seats left, and some guy puts his bag down on the chair next to him. He's not saving it for anyone, right? He couldn't just put it under his chair, right? Or like in front of him. He has to put it down on the seat next to him. And then you come in and there's like classes already started or is about to start. You're scrambling already. You're looking for a place to sit. And then like in front of all these people, you don't want to ask them like, hey, do you mind like moving your bag? Like I'm looking for a chair like with a desk to write, to take notes in class. Like I want you to use your imagination. You don't want to be that guy. In fact, you want to be the person that when they walk into class is thoughtful, mindful, respectful, enough, that has that adab, that actually when you walk in, you take a seat that's going to convenience the others around you, that's going to put their bag in a way that's not going to inconvenience the person in front of you, the person behind you, the person on your left, the person on your right. That is being mu'addib. That's having the adab in like every single day in these actions of your life. I hope that those points are getting across. That's what I mean. Like that's why we're spending time talking about this. That during the time we talked about Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal, I listened to a whole lecture series by one of my teachers on the biography of Imam Ahmad. It was 6 hours long, right? And it was on all the great Imams. Like they spent weeks and weeks on each of the great Imams. I'll tell you one point. I heard this years ago, but the one point that really blew me away when they were doing the introduction to Imam Ahmad. In Imam Ahmad's time, rahimahullah. And this is like one Imam, I'm saying, you can use this for like so many examples. They said at that time, how now we have Quran teachers, you teach your son, and I'm doing this, and I hope and pray that you have done it or you do it with your kids. You find a qari, right? A man or a woman, right? To teach your kids Quran, to teach your sons and daughters. That you want them to have tajweed. So you say, you arrange with this person, they come to your house, or you send them, after school to the maktab, alif bata, you learn the rules of fatah dhamma qasra, tanween, shadda, all of that, right? You build it up. You have to start, it's remedial, but you get better and better and better until you finally, like you've learned something, you've accomplished something. You do that for tajweed because we care about it, it's important, right? You do that for other things. I mean, you teach your kids like, all these things that you value in life. During the time of Imam Ahmad, people would send their children when they were young to scholars just of adab. Not just to teach them tajweed, not to just teach them how to do wudu and pray and to read and write and all that. They would actually send them to like mu'addibeen, people of adab. They would go and they would sit, they would eat, they would go and like watch the way these people live their lives, spend hours and hours with people that you trusted, you valued what they had, and that's how your kids learn adab. You didn't give them books. We didn't have to do online seminars. I mean, now we use the means available to us. Right? But I'm saying is that is how like our forefathers, and our predecessors, may Allah be pleased with them, that's the way they like learned, imbibed, right, adab, and then they passed it on to the next generations. And that's why these people just like and I mean, I don't mean to go off topic. I want to make sure I finish this next couple of points, but that's how like it affected everything in their life. Literally, it affected the clothes that they wore, the design of the clothes that they made, the food that they made, like the bowls and the cups that they ate from, that they made with their own hands, the houses, the tapestries, the beautiful artwork, that they decorated, the aesthetics of their house, like the scents, the bukhur, the way they perfumed their spaces when they welcomed their guests in, the way they served them tea, the way that, they would make places comforting and available for their family and for their guests. Like every aspect of your life, adab should infuse in the most beautiful way, right? Like aesthetically, like uplift every aspect of your life. That's why like, and there are people like this. Like we don't just tell stories of the past. There are people like this. I'm sure you've met some. I hope you've met some. There's still people living like this. Like, well, the way they welcome you. You can like, we talked about a few weeks ago, people have nur, they exude this nur. There's people that you just like see them smile, right? And when you welcome them they welcome you into their space, or just in that moment, that encounter, that, that, and that's coming from like, these are not like all sheikhs and people that have memorized this and memorized that. They are, and I don't mean this in a negative way at all, they are common, normal Muslims in terms of their levels of knowledge and practice, but these are people that are infused with adab, that is what impacts the hearts around them. And that's ultimately what it is if you purify your heart and that you take this on and you're around people like that, this is what, will affect. And I'm sure you've had these experiences. I bet, husna dhan, the benefit of the doubt, that your grandparents were like this. Your grandparents were people that grew up in times and places and societies, right, and moments in history that they were people of adab, because that was 2 generations ago of they was in this adabless society we live in now. And I want you to just imagine now in your age, if your grandparents are still alive and you've spent time in them, and look at the way these people talk and walk and eat, and the way they engage with you, the way they engage with your parents, the way they engage with their neighbors, and all of that. This is coming from a society, a culture, right? This is transcultural and transnational. That's what I want to point out. You're going to find the same threads, the same streams, I should say. Whether you're talking about Egyptian culture or South Asian culture or Sudani culture or Malay culture or Turkish culture or Maghrebi culture, any lands that have, traditional lands that have had Islam sort of, that have been dyed in Islam, right? That these societies and cultures, that this is just, it's a part of the ether, it's the way that people have been brought up and raised. Now, we live, mashallah, because not to be negative, we live in a very multicultural, multi-generational time, right, in our lives, in the place like the United States. And so that's beautiful, because you have other, even non-Muslim societies and cultures that still have remnants of this, right, of what it means to be, to have that. Now, I mean, the other challenges, we're living in a time now where this is all quickly being eroded, right, and being corroded. And so we have to be people that sort of maintain and preserve these things. But in the last few minutes left, subhanAllah, time's going faster than I thought. I have a few more points that I want to make. Sayyidina Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu and Sayyid Ibn Musayyib radiallahu anhu narrate a hadith in different categories that when visiting the sick, one should not remain for a long time. The visit should be short. This narration indicates the degree to which one should go in refraining from inconveniencing others. Sometimes a sick person, due to his or her condition, suffers inconvenience by the lengthy presence of their guests. However, the presence of such persons who are a source of comfort and solace to the sick are excluded from this prohibition. There's a very famous hadith that's behind this. I don't have the memorized in front of me, but I'll narrate to you the summary of it. The Prophet ﷺ said the most appropriate visitation of the sick is the shortest. It's a great sunnah to visit people that are sick, whether you know them or you don't know them. In fact, you can only imagine the ajr and the reward of visiting sick people that you don't even know, right? Because you're doing it only because of the rights that they have upon you as a mu'min or a mu'minah, as a believer, right? But when you go there, the sunnah is fulfilled. When you go there, you give salam, you make dua. Your physical and spiritual presence is a rewardable, praiseworthy act in and of itself. And then you stay for a short time and then you leave. Because the sickness, the illness of that person may for any number of reasons be exacerbated by you spending time, swarming people, opening visiting hours and people coming at all days and hours of the night. Unless you're an immediate caregiver, you're like a husband or wife or father or son or daughter or mother or khala or mamu that has the haqq of the right of being in that room, when the person is feeling good and when the person feels really bad, right? Then most people should not be in the room for longer than is appropriate. This is the care that the Prophet said. He said, go visit the people, but have the presence of mind that you go and then you leave them and let them. They're literally in a sense of physical and emotional debilitation and suffering at that time anyhow. Sayyidina Ibn Abbas explaining the reason for the need for the ghusl, for a shower on Friday, says that in the initial period of Islam, most of the Sahaba were actually poor laborers. Soiled garments and perspiration caused people to sweat and to have malodors on their clothes. Hence, a ghusl was declared wajib, obligatory in the beginning. Later, the incumbency, the wujub, was abrogated, and the ghusl for Jummah was delegated to be a sunnah act. It thus transpires that it's incumbent to refrain from causing the slightest inconvenience and annoyance to anyone. I'm going to give you a quick note on that, and I realize we only have 5 minutes to go, and there's a few more things that I wanted to say, but I'm going to give you a quick example of that. Right? And actually, we're going to talk in a few, I think probably in 2-3 weeks, we're going to get to a whole thing on how the Prophet ﷺ, his Jummah was like. And it's so beautiful. There's so many lessons in that. This is a general thing that we derive from Jummah. But say this, when you go to a place, and I will turn to my, turn to the brothers on this. When you go to a place, and mashallah, a place like the Musalla, where we obviously take our shoes off, you come and you pray, and etc., etc., you have to be very mindful There are people that when they come to Jummah, they come to the Musalla, they're wearing, and this is just to be frank, because this has to be a place of learning, right? That we can benefit from each other, right? Like put on clean socks. Don't come in with dirty, smelly socks. Because literally, like people praying next to you, like in the salah, like that is a very distracting and inconveniencing kind of behavior, right? In the same way that the hadith talks about, like, don't go to the masjid to pray if you've eaten raw onions and garlic, and this is mentioned in the hadith, that the angels run away from people like that in the salah. The Prophet says, don't even go to the masjid, like go and clean yourself before you go to the masjid. And so he's using an example here that the Sahaba wouldn't go to the masjid until they had like showered or at least cleansed themselves and put on clean clothes to be in the presence of, one is to be in the house of Allah, to be praying, to be focused on Allah. The second, level of concern is that the people around you, the musallis, the other congregants. In Sunan Nisai, there appears a narration in which Sayyidah Aisha radiallahu anha says that on Rasulullah's exit of the house on Laylatul Bara, on the night of Bara, he opened the door silently so as not to disturb the people that were sleeping in his house. Similarly, he closed the door silently. He did not commit any action which produced even the slightest noise. He totally abstained from any disturbance to ensure that no one's sleep was disturbed, nor was anyone suddenly awakened. Now there's so many hadith that go on, and we spent a lot of time sort of really fleshing it out, which I hope you benefited from. There's a few that I didn't get to go through here, but inshallah we can perhaps pick it up next week. But the idea here, the takeaway is this. I'm going to leave you with a couple of takeaways. Literally, if you boil all of this down, I'm going to give you like one sentence. Just do no harm. Don't inconvenience or hurt other people. And we talk about this like emotionally, physically, or psychologically, right? Harming others is graver than harming yourself. That's really the takeaway with this. Inconvenience yourself before you inconvenience other people, right? That is the adab mindset. If I'd rather make it difficult on myself than make it difficult for the other person. I'll leave it to you for what we've talked about before, and with your imagination to like fill in the blanks of what that looks like, right? A couple of other things, and then inshallah we'll conclude. Why are we spending time talking about this? I'm just going to come full circle to what we talked about before. Today we live in a time where people really only focus on aqidah, on aqaid, on beliefs, and on practices. And I'm not saying these are not important, but that is an incomplete understanding of Sharia. Sharia is what? It's beliefs, it's worship, it's transactions, it's conduct, and it's character. That is a full framework of the way we operate in Sharia. And if you neglect any of them, it's incomplete. There's people that only obsess over what you believe and how you pray, and then they don't care about your halal and haram actions. You can buy and sell haram things, like they don't care. That whole aspect of your economics and the halalness is like lost on them. Then there's people that's all they care about is the halalness and haramness of your interactions and whatnot. And then whether you're praying or not doesn't mean anything to them. You can see each one of these is deficient in its own way. And then there's people, but what happens, and this is what Sheikh Tanvi is writing 100 years ago. He said that society we're finding in a time that people, even if they check off the others, they've like focused on what you believe, your aqidah is straight. They focus on your prayer. Are you dressed the right way? Are you praying the right way? Are you doing whatever? Are you making sure that you're not doing riba and taking? And I'm not saying this in any way of diminishing it, but they focus on all that. But what do they always neglect? Most of the time is their actual personal conduct and the adab of how they deal with people. And I'll say this at the end, and maybe we'll leave this with one or two last points. What Sheikh Tanvi wrote, he was very firm with his students, and he bases on a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. I just want to read that to you, right? If I can find it here. There was one time a person came, a Sahabi was very excited, and he came to give a gift to the Prophet ﷺ. And he burst into the room where the Prophet ﷺ was. And the Prophet ﷺ looked at him and he says, leave, like literally get out, say salam, ask permission, and then come in. Now, why am I mentioning this, and why does Tanvi mention this in his introduction? He says, of course, we want and expect and need to have the most beautiful image of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that, we need that. That's who he was. One of my teachers said, if you imagine the nicest person in the world and you multiply that by 1,000,000, that was Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But part of good adab of being nice is that when you're a good teacher, you correct the mistakes of the people around you. The people that will listen. If no one's going to listen, then you just keep your mouth shut. But what did the Prophet say to this companion? The man is coming to give him a gift. To Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. He said, go back, give salam, ask if you can come in, and in that moment we have literally like, you can write pages and pages of commentary, right? Because there's certain people, if they really care about improving their adab, they want you to say, like you have that relationship that when they slip up and they have a breach of adab, there's bad adab, there's misconduct, right? There's disrespect, there's bad decorum or lack of decorum, right? There's inappropriate behavior. They want and expect that you're going to, with hikmah, like with wisdom, in the right way, right? Sometimes it can be something, like literally the hadith says it's one sentence. The Prophet said, leave, say salam, and ask permission and come back in. That's one sentence. But the student got what the teacher was trying to say. And there's some people you can sit that down for an hour and try to explain it, and it's just like, it's not penetrating. And so the point is that we want to have the kind of people and have the relationship with people in our lives that this idea of do no harm, don't inconvenience others, is that when there is a breach of adab and they make a mistake or they say the wrong thing, is that they can say to you, hey, I'm saying this, like the idea is this is for your own benefit, right? Like I'm just telling you. And then what happens if you really care, you won't make that mistake again, right? The idea is that it really sinks in, and that the next time, I'll just say literally one conversation I had, and this isn't even probably the best way I want to end, right? But we'll pick up inshallah next week. But this is a lesson to take home, right? I want you to think about how you talk to people, right? Not just like you talk to your friends and whatnot, but alhamdulillah, I have many friends and colleagues here who are faculty, right? And who are administrators. They actually have like really high positions and respectable positions at Yale. And in conversations like, and I think this is the stuff, this is what email has done, right? You just look at the way people sign off, like the salutations on their emails, right? People emailing their professors like 2 a.m, expecting a response, and like calling their teachers by their first name, not even a dear professor so-and-so, dear dean so-and-so, dear, so-and-so, and you put in a title of respecting what this man or woman has accomplished, right? It's just like, sometimes it's not even a dear, it's just like, I need an extension on my paper, or whatever, you can fill in the blank. Like, that is like such a meaningless like thing to point out, right? In the sense of like life at Yale or beyond and how people communicate today. But like, trust me, the recipient on the other line, these things, if they're woke in that sense, like they understand, like this person has no respect for, of who I am and of my time and of me reading this, of how you make a request and how you ask someone. And these are non-Muslims. And I'm not saying this to disrespect them. I'm saying that when we talk about adab, we talk about the best of creation, sallallahu, teaching the best of generations, about the best of character and the most refined way of being. And we're the inheritors of that, are supposed to be the people that teach the world and exemplify to the rest of the world that we had the best of teachers, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And these are breaches of adab. And then we look at our non-Muslim colleagues and neighbors and friends, and because this is part of the human heart, even their hearts and minds are like, yo, why the disrespect? Why are you talking to me like this? You know what I mean? And I'm not saying this to diminish them or put them down. I'm saying this is like at a human level, right? So I just use that as a random example. I literally was in a meeting today, and someone was joking around with a professor who clearly students should have been joking with his professor that way. And I was there, and I saw this person like talk back to a professor, and it was like a totally mundane, inane kind of comment. And I saw the look on the professor's face. This is a respectable person, and it was like like the wince, like obviously this professor is not gonna like in a meeting like correct this student kind of mouthing off, even though it was like sent as like a completely frivolous, just kind of a joking, before we were in the matters at hand. But like, this affects hearts, right? So what is the takeaway? And we're going to end with this, Bismillah. So then we're going to go straight to Isha. If the takeaway for today is, think about what did the Prophet teach about preserving the sanctity, right, of the heart of another person. And beautiful adab is about understanding, doing the right thing in the right way at the right time. That's going to keep that heart, have that connection, and is not in any way going to repulse it, right? Like you have magnets that like come together, and then you flip them, and then they like you can't even put them together because there's automatically like a repulsion, right? We need to be people that the way we live our lives, the way we eat, the way we talk, the way we dress, the way we engage, the way we interact. Like I said, we're not even talking about belief and worship and all of that. We're talking about the rest of your life, the 95% of the rest of your day and of your week, right? Is that be people that the heart is brought together and not repulsed. Why do you think that when the Bedouins and the people of the cities and the Sayyids, the leaders of the tribes, right, from the Byzantium Empire and from the hinterlands of the Arabian Peninsula, like people from totally different sectors, like the richest, most powerful people of that time, to the people that were literally roaming the deserts, like at the far ends of the spectrum, when they sat with the Prophet ﷺ, even for moments, their hearts melted because they were in the presence of the best of creation, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He knew how to talk to the Bedouin, tiger hunter, right, that literally lived outside of civilization, that was a nomad, and he knew how to talk to people that came from the courts of the Persian and Sasanian empires, right, and the Byzantine empires. He knew how to talk to both types of people, and that's beautiful adab. May Allah Ta'ala make us people who understand the value of these teachings, who learn them, have people in our lives that can teach them to us, that model them for us, and that we can ask the right questions to. Ameen Ya Rabbil Alameen. Jazakumullah khair for coming today. Inshallah, next week we're going to pick up with just wrapping up the book Adabul Muasharat, and then we're going to start a long series. Inshallah, it'll probably go for till the end of the semester, of this class that I was blessed to take with one of my teachers, Mufti Hussein Kamani, called Prophetic Code, and graciously he's allowed his students to use the slides, and so it's a whole slideshow, and I'm going to email it out so you can actually read the slides before we come to class, and I'm going to, from my notes, I'm going to go back and teach what I learned, inshallah, on it. So Jazakumullah khair for coming. Inshallah, we'll transition now to Salatul Isha.